How sure are you that the world around you is real? How concrete is your sense of reality? That the things you see, hear, taste, smell, and touch are actually there and not just figments of your imagination? Or, much more frighteningly, aren't the figments of something else's imagination? Say you have a dream that you're a butterfly in a garden on a scenic summer's day, flying from flower to flower, and then you wake up in your bed the next morning. Can you be certain, as Zen Master Zhuang once asked, if you're a man dreaming you're a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming you're a man? These same questions haunted an SCP Foundation researcher named James Talerin for years, before his colleagues found him dead under extremely mysterious circumstances. What follows is a story of how James Talerin died, put together as best I could from the scattered files at the highest levels of Foundation classification. Because if what I've found is true, then James Talerin found a glitch in reality itself, a terrible, broken thing that throws everything we've ever experienced into question. And the other question we need to answer today is, did James Talerin save existence as we know it? Before his reality changed forever, Talerin became obsessed with one of the most mysterious anomalies on the SCP Foundation database, SCP-3999, which seemed to have no file and records available to Level 3 researchers. Being an inquisitive enough fellow, he wanted to get to the bottom of this. Given that plenty of anomalies out there had info-hazardous properties, meaning they could mess with people even knowing about them, he decided that this would warrant further investigation. He had no idea back then that all of reality itself hung in the balance. After asking questions around the containment site where he was stationed, he managed to gain clearance to the containment chamber. That's when he got the sense that something was amiss. He found himself at the mouth of a high-security elevator, and after swiping his clearance card, he stepped inside. The elevator began its kilometer-long descent into the earth. Along the sides of the shaft, Talerin could see Scranton reality anchors, devices specifically built to negate reality warping anomalous abilities, fixed to the sides at regular intervals. Concerningly, each one seemed to have burnt out or exploded. What on earth was the Foundation hiding down there? That's when he heard strange words, a corruption of the poetry of T.S. Eliot, looping through his mind. Let us go then, you and I, when the 11-day empire eats the sky, like a humanoid melting like clams upon the breakfast table. And so began the end of reality itself. Researcher James Talerin blinked, and he was standing in the middle of what seemed to be a Foundation containment chamber. But he wasn't trapped in there with an anomaly. It was just him, and a large group of senior researchers was watching him from outside the glass of a viewing port, seemingly taking notes. It was like he wasn't the researcher anymore. He was the anomaly, trapped here. And then he noticed it. The thing standing behind the senior researchers, though none of them seemed to notice it. A huge, dark figure, standing 2 heads taller than anyone in that room, its face a grinning mess of eyes and teeth. This was SCP-3999, the head researcher on the case of James Talerin. Talerin tried to plead his case, but no one responded to him. Suddenly, pain shot all through his body, as though his nervous system was replaced by barbed wire. He collapsed to the ground as the other researchers took notes. Suddenly, several television screens appeared all around the room, each facing towards Talerin. Each one showed a shaky, first-person video feed that seemed to come from the helmet camera of a different Mobile Task Force member heading into a different building. Talerin recognized each one: the salon where his mother worked, the tax accounting office where his father worked, his younger sister's dorm at Penn State University. Talerin didn't know what was going on. He wouldn't remain that way for long, though. On each of the screens, the Mobile Task Force breached. In the top left screen, he saw the man whose POV he was following pull out a silenced handgun and murder his mother in front of her screaming coworkers and clients. A similar thing happened in his father's office. The Mobile Task Force agent pulled out a tactical karambit and lunged towards Talerin's father, plunging it into the unfortunate man's neck. But worst of all was what happened to his sister. At least in the first 2 killings, there had been no collateral damage, but in the feed of the Penn State video, he saw his sister and her friends freeze in confusion, that soon curdled into horror when the barrel of an M249 SAW light machine gun entered the frame. It fired until there was nothing left alive in the video. Talerin screamed and banged his fists against the glass viewing port of the chamber until he left red stains against the surface, begging for the slaughter to end. But sadly, it was actually just beginning. SCP-3999 had drawn up a list of every worker at the Foundation that Talerin had ever been in contact with. Every friend, every colleague, everyone he'd so much as shared a word with. All of them would have to go next. And under the order of the new administrator of the SCP Foundation, one SCP-3999, all of them would have to be terminated post-haste. It was a massacre all across the site. Many of the targets were arrested and then taken out the back of the facility, forced to their knees, and executed. Cafeteria staff were instructed to put arsenic in the food of anyone on the list. Those who were on field missions had Foundation drones sent after them, blowing up entire city blocks with them inside to kill them if necessary. No demand that SCP-3999 gave could ever be refused. Soon enough, James Talerin was teleported out of his cell and into the barren lands outside the containment site. There he was surrounded by huge bonfires, each containing the thousands of charred bones of everyone he'd ever known. His mind almost cracked from the sheer horror of witnessing it, when SCP-3999 appeared next to him and laid an appendage that might be a hand on his shoulder.
This seems like the beginning of a beautiful eternity, Jamesy boy.
It said in a voice that made his ears bleed. Not far from where Talerin collapsed, a giant granite statue depicting SCP-3999 had been erected, guarded by a pair of heavily armed Mobile Task Force members. Talerin blinked, and a lifetime had passed. He was surrounded by members of the Serpent's Hand in their flowing cloaks, somehow believing that he was not himself, but Brian Frederick Bondisky, a high-ranking Fifthist leader. Perhaps he was always Bondisky. Perhaps Bondisky had just dreamed that there was a man named Researcher James Talerin, and that unfortunate man's world had ended in the most terrible way. It was almost comforting to believe that, until he felt a presence beside him. He turned and saw that SCP-3999 was standing next to him, doing the closest it could possibly manage to a grin with its monstrous features. He remembered that he was Talerin, and this was just another cruel trick. He was the bait, but better the bait than the butt of the joke. In what might have been moments or years later, hard to tell, James was standing in the burning remains of the Wanderer's library. Dead and screaming Serpent's Hand members all around him, blood on his own wounded hands. SCP-3999 just laughing next to him, having a jolly old time. In a flash, Talerin found himself in a Foundation termination chamber, used rarely, but vital when a humanoid anomaly or person of interest is deemed too dangerous to live. SCP-3999 just stood and laughed as a Foundation agent approached Talerin with a handgun, aimed it at the researcher's head, and fired. James Talerin was killed. James Talerin woke up again, alive. The memories of all the horrors that came before are hazy and frightening, like a half-remembered nightmare rendered hazy upon waking. He was sitting at the end of a long table, seemingly being interviewed by another researcher. The researcher asked him who he was. "I'm Researcher Talerin, one of the researchers assigned to SCP-3999. The other researcher seemed confused by this, told him that they had no records of him. The memories of something before were beginning to resurface in the distorted soup that was Talerin's mind. Something happened here. He said, "I told you there's something funny happening to me, but I can't quite describe it. It's like in a dream where things are really disconnected. I have trouble focusing on things now. I just feel a lot of unease. It's like reality has started to feel less real, if that makes sense." The researcher asked him who he was again, that exact same inflection as before, like he was a toy with only 6 fun gaslighting phrases that it would say when you pulled a string on his back. But Talerin wasn't going to just play to this fool's script. He asked the doctor his name, and the man just replied with an odd, choked screeching noise. The room began to melt like old film stock as the monstrous SCP-3999 rose up from behind the doctor interviewing Talerin, devouring the imperfect puppet as reality itself seemed to congeal into a nightmarish, semi-solid soup. James Talerin woke up. He was a baby in his mother's arms. What a terrible dream this whole thing had been. What an awful, impossible dream. He grew up, went to school, made friends, got a job, found a husband, grew old. Never had anything to do with the SCP Foundation, never got assigned to SCP-3999. Years passed. Decades passed. And in his twilight years, he was shot in the head while taking a walk through the park. The shot came from a Remington Model 700 sniper rifle, fired by a Foundation Mobile Task Force member hiding in the bushes nearby. James Talerin woke up. He was a researcher for the SCP Foundation. Except, no, he was Max Lipschutz, a high-ranking Maxwellist leader, standing before members of the Church of the Broken God with a wonderful gift to give them, SCP-3999. Soon enough, Max Lipschutz was standing in the ashes of a Broken God cathedral, the tortured bodies of the mechanists writhing in the muck. 3999 stood above him again, running appendages that might have been fingers through his hair, ruffling it the way you might pet a dog. And the monster had so many eternities of ideas that it still wanted to try out. James Talerin woke up, but he was no longer James Talerin. He was a scented candle in the office of SCP-3999, which was reclining in a huge leather office chair. It snapped one of its appendages, and Talerin's wick set alight, causing a terrible burning sensation like being attacked by thousands of hungry fire ants. This would not end for hours and hours, until the scented candle that was James Talerin was burnt down all the way to the base. He had no idea what scent he was during this period, because he didn't have a nose. When he woke up again, he was in his sister's dorm at Penn State University. SCP-3999 was mercilessly torturing his sister, while a pair of Mobile Task Force agents held his arms in place, so there was nothing he could do to intervene. And after hours upon hours of torture, SCP-3999 took his sister to a nearby Meyer Dairy ice cream store, where the two of them shared a banana split.
"Why are you doing this?"
she asked, tears racing down her cheeks.
Because it's so much fun.
SCP-3999 said, eating a spoonful of ice cream.
Do I really need any more reason than that?
Talerin woke up in the dark of the SCP-3999 containment chamber. He heard his own voice echoing off the walls, saying,
Let me out! Let me out! This isn't funny, guys. This thing is slowly killing me in here. I'm trapped with it.
Was that what was happening here? He didn't even know anymore. He got up and threw his body against the wall of the chamber with all of his might. It fell down like the cheap, painted cardboard backdrops of a middle school play. Beyond, there was just infinite darkness, where the eyes of SCP-3999 watched with voyeuristic glee. There was nothing here. Nothing but him and it. This is when he started to understand what was really going on here. He was trapped in whatever this place was with this thing, and there was no reality outside of it anymore. It was the Alpha and Omega. It controlled the horizontal and the vertical. Perhaps they were looking at a state of reality distortion, or worse, a ZK-class end-of-reality scenario. But no plan was perfect, especially not the plan of a capricious monster intent on absolute sadism above all else. There would be some oversight, some flaw in the design, something he could exploit. Because even if this thing was powerful, that didn't necessarily mean it was smart. He would find its weakness, and when he did, he'd destroy this thing. Buoyed by the desire for revenge for everything he'd been put through, he began tearing at the ground with his fingernails, scratching it up, ripping chunks away. He was able to tear a little hole and saw light glowing up through it. And then, reality folded in on itself like old laundry. James Talerin woke up, and the horrors resumed. He was a test subject for head researcher SCP-3999 once again, eager to use his body to test the full extent of pain that a human being can tolerate over however many lifetimes, and the latest experiment it had planned was a real doozy. Members of Mobile Task Force Lambda-14 held the unfortunate researcher down and injected between 40,000 and 50,000 tapeworm eggs into his bladder. While in a terrible state of discomfort from this, he would be forced to spoon-feed cornflakes into the terrible maw of SCP-3999 every night. The creature had officially changed its designation in the halls of the Foundation to Godhead Immortal and Supreme. As part of the containment protocols for the anomaly known as James Talerin, he would need to be executed once a month. Of course, this would only leave him dead for a little while each time, and after, he'd be forced to watch his parents being tortured in front of him. Godhead Immortal and Supreme 3999 considered this to be the most wonderful entertainment. Researcher Talerin would have a water hose inserted into his body, painfully filling him with water until he achieved a spherical shape. SCP-3999 would set Researcher Talerin on fire and toast marshmallows over him as he burns. SCP-3999 would put Researcher James Talerin through every form of pain that it could conceive, and its appetite for suffering was completely and utterly boundless. It was willing to hurt anyone, of course, but only insofar as hurting those people could wound and isolate Researcher James Talerin. It was somehow intrinsically connected to Talerin, and Talerin himself began to realize this. He was at the center of everything that happened to him. He was the nexus where all of the creature's drives towards suffering and torment met. He was the ant burning under God's magnifying glass. He was at the center of everything that happened to him. He was at the center of everything that happened to him. And at a point, just torturing one Researcher James Talerin wasn't enough. It split him into 48 clones and trapped him in a terrible building made of hundreds of concentric circles, running around like rats in a maze, being tormented forever and ever. They lived, they died, they lived again, they died again. Rinse and repeat. The monster never got bored of hurting him. Somehow, perhaps through sheer force of will and through understanding how the terrible mind of his jailer actually worked, he was able to wrestle control. Not total control, but enough control for him to sit across from the monster on a long, metal table. The researcher interviewing the anomaly, as things should be. He chastised the creature, saying, "Even you cannot survive without order. You latched onto me and still need me. A pathetic excuse for order to exist. This is pathetic. You're pathetic." The monster responded as monsters do, with attempts at intimidation, with threats of violence. But Researcher James Talerin, and he truly was Researcher James Talerin, was not scared by this monster, merely disgusted by it. He yelled, "You can't frighten me anymore." For the first million years of nonsensical containment procedures and tortures and dream logic, it was the worst pain I'd ever felt. But I survived. For the second million years of nonsensical containment procedures, it was still the hardest thing I had ever done. But I survived. By the third million years, I was growing numb. There's only so many times you can watch anything before you grow numb. But you know what, you freak? I survived. Which is more than you can claim, you dumb brute, because you never lived at all. For the first time in so many lifetimes, the monster was dumbstruck. And sensing for the first time in all of eternity that he had the upper hand, James kept going. So who are you, exactly? Ask yourself that. Who are you before a human who is ready to fight? You're nothing but the primordial ooze. And I am ready to fight. I am numb to your nonsense. Because here's the thing about horror and weirdness. The more you reveal, the less effect it has. I am sick of your horror. I am sick of you. As punishment for this act of rebellion, and what a glorious act it was, SCP-3999 slowly melted Researcher James Talerin over the course of 5 grueling years. But Talerin knew that he'd begun to turn the tide in his favor. If he could end this monster, then reality would return to how it always should have been. He just needed to figure out how. And somehow, he did. Back in the reality that we consider our own, that we have the ontological arrogance to assume is realer than the world where Talerin was trapped, something strange happened. The site director of Site-118 came to the realization that one of the newly transferred researchers at the site, one Researcher James Talerin, hadn't been accounted for in a couple days. After conducting internal investigations, he found that the researcher had taken an interest in SCP-3999, an anomaly that they had no record of ever existing. until they found an elevator shaft leading a kilometer below the Earth with multiple broken Scranton reality anchors lining its metal surfaces. At the bottom of the shaft, they found the dead body of researcher James Talerin, and his phone, where the extensive notes that make up the majority of this account were found. The impossible ordeal that James Talerin had gone through. The official file on SCP-3999 concludes with, "It has been determined that researcher Talerin was assigned to SCP-3999. SCP-3999 had significant reality warping properties. It breached containment at some point and caused either a CK-class reality restructuring event or a ZK-class end-of-reality event, and it was successfully terminated by researcher Talerin at the cost of his own life, reversing said event." There are many things we'll still never know about SCP-3999, but there is one thing we can say with some degree of certainty. In his sacrifice, in his almost infinite suffering, researcher James Talerin saved the rest of us from it. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-5056, The Constant Companions.